Well, I'm at the Madras Motor Racing Track in Chennai, and we've just completed another successful edition of the Autocar Track Day, as you can see by what I'm wearing. We set some really hot laps and they've gone down really well, but we have the track to ourselves for a few more hours, and of course what we want to do is drive a little bit harder, a little bit more, get a few more shots in on this wonderful track. However, things just have a way of not going according to plan, and Mother Nature had other ideas. But let's make hay while the rain pours, shall we? So what I'm going to do now is slip into something a little bit more comfortable. There are a lot of special cars at our track day today, but one really stood out for being not so special going around the track. Yes, it's the AMG S-Class Coupe, and even though it is the second most powerful car at this year's event, it's not hard to see why it ranks so low on the lap times list. So if scorching lap times aren't its thing, what is it for? Maybe this is a good time to find out. Now isn't this just great? Yes, as you can probably hear by the pitter-patter on the roof, it's still raining quite heavily. But I'm on a track in an AMG, so all is well in the world. Yes, it's the mighty AMG S63 Coupe I'm driving today. And that means a 4-litre twin-turbo V8 with 612 horsepower and 900 Newton meters of torque. And the best part is, unlike the E63, which has the same engine and the same power output, this one is only rear-wheel drive. So that means all that torque is only going through the back wheels, not all four, which is hilarious. At the moment, I have the car firmly set in comfort mode, and with all the water on the track and the suspension in its soft, wallowy setting, I might as well be in a boat. It's got that lovely swaying, rocking motion, but I have to say, nowhere near as much as in the S-Class sedan. This is an AMG after all, so even though it has air suspension at all four corners, it's slightly firmer, and even in comfort mode, there's reasonably good body control. It's kind of the best of both worlds, you see. And because I'm in no tearing hurry to drive this car fast right now, I'm going to enjoy not just what makes it an AMG, but also what makes it an S-Class. There's this deliciously trimmed dashboard right here in red leather and this thick slab of carbon fiber, because this is an AMG, that runs the entire width of the dashboard. And of course, the trademark twin 12.3-inch screens that make up the instruments and the infotainment. It's a lovely blend of old world luxury and new age tech. And there's a bit more of this S-Class and AMG duality in the seats I'm in. As you can probably tell, they're massive, massive thrones. And of course, they've spared no expense with these seats because they are heated, cooling, and massaging. So I'm going to choose one of these energizing comfort programs. I think I'll go for well-being. So now I've got a gentle massage that's also warming me, and some pleasant music preset coming through the stereo speakers. Not just any stereo speakers, Burmester hi-fi stereo speakers. Not your average day at the racetrack then. But when you're done with all the heating, cooling, massaging, and the energizing comfort system, you will at some point realize that you are in an AMG, and that means exploring a few sporty things about this car. So I'll start by turning it from comfort to Sport Plus. That sounds good, doesn't it? The classic AMG V8 rumble, downsizing, turbocharging, it still sounds amazing. But I'm still keeping things at a very medium pace on this track because it's hard to hit the apexes when they're underwater. And a lot of them are right now. Still, that slightly floaty ride from the air suspension, it's all but disappeared. Okay, it's no Ferrari, but it's definitely sporty. It's definitely got this true Grand Tourer vibe to it. I imagine when you're going on your cross-country journey and you come across a mountain road, put it in Sport Plus, and you could very well have a good time with this thing. Although I haven't had a back-to-back comparison, I can safely say this is right up there with the Bentleys and Aston Martins of the world when it comes to luxury grand tourers. And it's always important to remember that AMG was an engine maker first. And so, find yourself an open straight like the one I've got here, pin the throttle. Ooh, over 600 horsepower, 900 Newton meters, and that sound. That's what an AMG is all about. Oh. Now, when he drove this car earlier at our track day, Naren Karthikeyan came back saying, this is not a car for a track. And I have no doubts about that. I could have told you that before he even sat in the driver's seat. But what I do find amazing is that still, despite its amazing, impeccable luxury credentials, it still manages to give you a little bit of a thrill. It is still an AMG. It still feels that way. And in short bursts at least, you can feel that. Don't bring it to a track, of course not. But when you're in your big metropolitan city late at night, when the lights have gone down and you have the roads to yourself, you really wouldn't mind one of these.
It's been nearly a year since I first rode the Panigale V4 at the Valencia circuit in Spain. Nothing has come close to the experience since. On the racetrack, this is a simply astonishing motorcycle. But today is not about the racetrack. Today, I'm going to ride one of the fastest motorcycles in the world on the ultimate testbed, that is the Indian public road system. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and answer two questions. A, can you genuinely ride this bike on our roads? And B, should you?
Let me tell you straight away that the Panigale V4 is incredibly capable in the environment that it's meant for, and that you are far likely to reach your own limits before you even scratch those of the motorcycle. So instead of the standard review points of performance, ride and handling, I'm going to tell you more about what the V4 is like in the real world. And we begin with one of the prime reasons that superbikes sell in our market, because they look like superbikes. And my word, the V4 is one of the prettiest superbikes that I've ever had the pleasure of gazing at. The design is an evolution of the previous Panigale 1299, and it's become sharper and even more breathtaking with a set of mean-looking headlamps, muscular but tight bodywork, and a deliciously executed tail section.
I just can't stop staring at this motorcycle. The Panigale V4 is achingly gorgeous, and I could sit here for hours just soaking it all in. And it's not just the overall design. When you actually walk up close to the bike, you'll notice some exquisitely finished design and detail touches.
The attention to detail here is something else, especially in some bits like the immaculately finished steering triple clamp, the exotic magnesium front subframe, and the exposed rear wheel. Little hints at how hard Ducati has worked to reduce weight also show in the minimal rear bodywork and those surprisingly slim foot pegs. Every gram saved counts.
This new Panigale is such a gorgeous motorcycle that sometimes you'll find yourself in the situation where you'd rather be looking at the bike than riding it. And big city traffic is one such situation. Don't get me wrong though, any of these kind of motorcycles is a pain to ride in big city traffic, but the V4, this takes it to a whole new level.
Part of the issue here rises in the seating position. It's quite extreme, more so than most Japanese rivals, and the seat is rock hard too. Clearly, comfort was at the back of the designer's to-do list, and given the intended role of the motorcycle, that's completely understandable. But the real challenge comes in the heat. After 15 to 20 minutes in traffic, the heat gets so intense in the frame that you simply can't hold onto the motorcycle with your thighs and you have to let go. This puts even more pressure on your wrists, which only tires you out further. A properly heavy clutch and an engine that gets grumpy below 2000 RPM are just the icing on top. Now, I'm not one to complain about hot motorcycles, but believe me when I tell you, you want to stay away from heavy traffic with this one.
Here's a fun fact. In heavy traffic, the heat on this bike gets so intense that even the key gets hot.
Now naturally, this tendency to get hot is not news to big bike owners, and most who live in big cities tend to take their bikes out late at night. I did this too, and I found the Panigale easier to live with, and the full LED headlamp provides good illumination in the dark as well. But there's no denying that within urban limits, this bike feels like a caged beast constantly pulling against a chain. And that chain is only as strong as how much control you've got over your right wrist. And believe me, you need a lot of self-control, given that this 1100cc V4 engine makes 214 horsepower. Factor in a curb weight of 198 kilos, and you have an almost unimaginable power-to-weight ratio. With this kind of performance, whacking the throttle open anywhere is almost impossible.
On the street, two things really stand out, and the first and biggest of them is just how much power this V4 engine has. The performance is insane, shattering, overwhelming even. No road feels big enough, and there's so much performance on offer, it always seems just out of reach. The second thing, and this took me by surprise, is just how loud this bike is. I couldn't believe it was running a stock pipe at first, but yes, this is a stock exhaust. To give you some perspective, this bike actually feels louder than some bikes that I've ridden with aftermarket slip-on exhausts.
The power really never seems to end. To give you a sense of what it's like, the V4 will hit 142 km per hour in first gear, and the rate of acceleration is just ferocious all the way through. On a long straight at a racetrack, the bike accelerates all the way up to 300 km per hour, at which point the digital display stops showing the speed. But the V4 will keep building speed until it eventually runs into the rev limiter, which is said to be at around 310 km per hour. Having ridden the Panigale V4 twice now, I'm still reeling from its violence, and the way it accelerates almost feels like warp drive from Star Trek. Out on the road, you can't even imagine exploring this amount of performance, and I discovered that just riding up to 7000 RPM in every gear was plenty fast enough. That's not even half of the bike's 14,500 RPM rev limit, and it's well before the real power band kicks in. Thankfully, the V4's Brembo Stylema brakes are just incredible. They're the best I've ever experienced, and they do a tremendous job of shedding speed with just one finger on the lever.
But what I'm really grateful for is the electronics package. It's vast, highly customizable, and very advanced in its operation. Most of all, it gives you some peace of mind that there is a system watching your back.
We could dedicate a whole separate review for the electronics on offer, but to put it briefly, the Ducati offers multi-stage adjustable traction control, cornering ABS, engine brake control, slide control, and a very hard-working 8-stage wheelie control. For those of you keen to go drag racing, there's also a 3-stage launch control. All these systems work subtly in the background, and they do a great job of allowing you to feel like a riding hero who's taming all that wild Italian horsepower.
Now, for just how violently fast this bike can be, I'm actually quite impressed with the suspension. Now obviously it's very firm and sporty and doesn't have a lot of travel, but the damping does allow it to absorb small bumps to a reasonable extent. And in that regard, it's much better than some other Italian exotics that I've experienced that feel uncomfortably stiff and harsh in comparison.
The Panigale V4 is an exotic in every sense of the word. It's achingly beautiful and monumentally capable. It's also a proper pain to deal with in day-to-day life, but the discomfort is not the real problem. To me, the issue here is that the Panigale never feels truly satisfying on the road, and that's because its sheer breadth of capabilities is at a much higher level than what the road can sustain. But then again, this isn't a day-to-day motorcycle, and it's this very focus that gives the Panigale V4 such a sense of occasion and makes it such a spectacular onslaught on all your senses. Considering what's on offer, I think that the price tag of at least 20 lakh for this base V4 model is very reasonable.
To those of you that aspire to own this machine, I can tell you that it's everything you could possibly dream of, and then some. But I'll also tell you this, if you plan to buy this bike and solely use it on the road, you're doing yourself and the machine a great injustice. The Panigale V4 was born and bred on the racetrack, and that's where it thrives, especially in the Indian context.
if it's December, is that time of the year where Mercedes owners come together to celebrate their cars. Celebrate, you ask why? Because these are very special cars. Yes, it's the time of the year for the Mercedes-Benz Classic Car Rally. And this year we have some pretty special cars over here. We have every S-Class, we have every SL, and every body type of the last two generations of the E-Class as well. It's really rare to see all of them gathered together in one place, so feast your eyes. It was hard to believe it was 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning with a kind of buzz at the Sofitel BKC. There were 95 entries for the Mercedes-Benz Classic Car Rally this year, and that too because it was a limited edition. Such is the passion for the three-pointed star around the country. The newly appointed CEO of Mercedes-Benz India was happy to see that passion.
I think there's differences how the markets work with the heritage, and I'm definitely sure here we see a very strong relationship to the brand and to its history, and I believe it's stronger than in many other countries.
Even he couldn't resist the allure of the cars and took a shot at driving the patent wagon. The Maharaja of Gondal's stunning 300 SL Roadster is the only one of its kind in our country, and it was one of the star attractions, as was Vivek Goenka's W08 Nürburg, Mercedes' first ever 8-cylinder car, and also the only one in the country, in fact, one of the few in the world.
We found this car, Shapur, about 8 or 9 years ago. It was belonging to a very famous collector of those days and abandoned in one of the mines in Dhanbad. It obviously was a car from some royalty, but the earlier owners didn't want to speak about its provenance. It does belong to one of the royal states of the West Bengal. The car was in complete shambles. It even had a truck grill and a truck radiator and things like that. We had to actually build it from scratch. So every part of the car was rebuilt. And today I can proudly say it's almost one of the cars that can stand for a Conco anywhere.
Following it on the popularity charts were Hormuzji Kama's majestic and incredibly rare 500K. Whilst all the owners had the glimmer of the three-pointed stars in their eyes, a lot of them also told us how difficult it was to keep these beauties in such immaculate condition.
It's a headache to maintain, no doubt, but it's a nice car.
There was no flooring, there was no fuel tank. The steering was broken, so it had to be completely restored. When we restored it with all original parts. So it took some time to locate them, but fortunately with Mercedes you could get all the parts. So it's restored like almost new. So now it's, even after 6 months, half self and it starts it.
It's been a struggle to start with to restore it. It went through 2 rounds of restoration before I drove a first kilometer in it.
Did a lot of restoration. We got a lot of help from the Oldtimer Center in Stuttgart. And they've been helping us ever since.
It's one of those few cars that we've had in India that's single-family owned car. This is probably the oldest single-family owned car in India. And the oldest Benz in India as well. So it happened to be bought by my grandfather back in 1914. And after the restoration, we even recovered all the original invoices, all original correspondence between my grandfather and Benz. And this is a car from Benz and C, before Mercedes and Benz merged. So this is from the original Bertha Benz from Mannheim. So there are not too many of these left in the world.
The crowds were just lapping up the sight of these rare cars, and the chance to get close to them was just the icing on the cake. For those that didn't make it to Sofitel, the parade kicked off from BKC and drove all the way to Worli Seaface and back. The owners were on a high, and some of them even did burnouts on the way out. And the cars may be older than us, but each one made that journey to Worli and back with utmost ease. 300 Adenauer models, every generation of the E-Class, S-Class and SL Class, including a brace of Pagodas, 190 SLs, a W124 Cabriolet and a number of W123 coupe sedans and wagons along with C126 SECs as well line the parade. A beautiful 190 SL formerly owned by Bollywood actor Shashi Kapoor was part of the parade too. Filling up the remaining space was almost every body style of the uber-successful 170V model range. First time ever, we had two extremely rare R107 SLC coupes. This is an occasion for owners to come and celebrate their cars and each other, sharing their joint passion for the three-pointed star.
This event's absolutely fantastic. It's, I think, the 5th year now. And the first time I drove the car was when I drove it from Pune to Bombay for that event in 2014.
Really heartening to be here and to see, because normally you think yours is the only beauty which is in Bombay. But when you see around here, you're just one of them. Yeah. And it's nice to see that. Yeah.
You see so many cars, you make friends. It's a lovely event. And you should do it more and more.